event. I would also like to remind the audience about another upcoming joint webinar teaching about diversity and the controversy over critical race theory. The program will be moderated by Bill Loftus, North County Social Policy Director, and will include the history of critical race theory, a presentation by Dr. Fabiola Bagula, Senior Director of the Equity Department of the San Diego County Office of Education, and Yusuf Miller of the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. The event is next Wednesday, October 27th at 11:30. Information and registration for the event can be found on both leagues' websites. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Carol Parker. Carol is a board member of the North County League focusing on natural resource policy. She also will be representing the League of Women Voters of the United States as an official observer at the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference, or COP26 in Scotland. Carol?
Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome everyone and welcome to the Imagine a Day Without Water in the San Diego region. So we are having this event to celebrate today's national educational campaign, Imagine a Day Without Water, to raise awareness of water in our lives. Can you imagine if there was no water to drink or wash your hands, no water to cook with, shower, or flush the toilet? Hospitals, schools, and restaurants would close without water. This would be bad if this happened even for one day, but day after day, water comes out of our faucets with a simple turn of the handle. I think it is amazing that the water agencies along the state and local governments have done such a great job bringing water to our homes that most of us take it for granted. Do you know where your water comes from? Do you know what water district serves your home? Do you know what is in store for our region's water supplies with our current drought and the hotter, drier future of climate change? These and other issues will be discussed by our panel this evening. I hope you all got a chance to see the documentary River's End, California's Next Water War. If you didn't yet see the documentary, the link that was provided with your registration should work through October 24th. I want to say up front that the League of Women Voters nor any of our speakers are representing River's End, so we won't be defending the views in the documentary. Rather, this webinar is focused on the water issues of the San Diego region, which have historically used a lot of water from Northern and Central California via the State Water Project that was described in the movie. We wanted everyone to see this documentary, not to depress you about California's water issues, but to highlight a theme in the movie. California residents are connected by our water use. River's End described the many players in our state water issues and the difficulties of balancing all the water uses. As San Diegans, we are linked to distant parts of the state by the water we drink, the food we eat, the policies of the water agencies, as well as the decisions of local and state governmental leaders. It is important to be educated about state and local water issues so that we can think, use carefully, and vote wisely regarding this important resource. I am looking forward to hearing from our panel of experts that will help us understand more about the water issues in the San Diego region. Our first speaker is Dee Zinke. She is Assistant General Manager of External Affairs for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Ms. Zinke has a 35-year career in public affairs, working on complex policy issues related to water resources, environmental issues, and housing in California. Welcome, Dee.
Well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here today. It's a pleasure in general to have a chance to reach out and connect with people on water. So thank you for the invitation. And I love the theme of today. It's a day that we celebrate in the water world, imagining a day without water. And I hope you won't mind that I changed your title a little bit to say, it's hard to imagine a day without water in the San Diego region. And you're going to hear a little bit about that from Dana after I speak today. But I'm going to talk about what happens before water comes into the county, what we're doing as a regional agency to bring water to Southern California. Now, I just have to ask a question. I do not see the PowerPoint slides moving, so I want to make sure, there we go. All right. So then next. So the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is the nation's largest wholesale water provider. And we are your regional wholesaler who brings water from 2 different sources mainly. And I'll talk a little bit about the sources in a second. But we cover a 5,200 square mile area, 6 counties in Southern California from the Ventura area down to the Mexican border. And the different colors you see on this map are our 26 member agencies. In this region, we serve a population collectively between ourselves, our member agencies, and the retail water providers, 19 million people. So it's a very large area. This is 1 in 17 people in the United States of America and half of California's population, all in this little crescent in the corner of in the corner of California. And this region and this water supply supports a $1 trillion economy. Next. Metropolitan was formed in 1928, and we've been working since then to try to develop, bring water to the region, treat it, and serve it to all of our communities, working with a cooperative board of directors that represents all of our member agencies. And we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going from here. But just to talk about now, what's happening with the water supply, I'm going to start by explaining the sources of water. Next. We have 2 main imported sources of water for this region. The first coming from the upper Colorado River Basin where the Rockies are. This water supply comes down through the Colorado River and then in an aqueduct built by the Metropolitan Water District, which is in fact why we were formed, that water is delivered to this region and it makes up about 25% of our supply in Southern California. The other main source of our imported supply is a state water project, which is a water supply project, that starts with Oroville Reservoir up in Northern California in the Northern Sierras, collects water and moves water down south through the state to our region. That's about 30% of our supplies in an average year. The rest of our supplies, the 45%, is developed out of local resources, and it's not uniform across the region. Some parts of our service area have great groundwater supplies. Others less so. So we have a combination of groundwater, recycled water, desal water, thanks to the Bud Lewis facility in San Diego County. And then the city of Los Angeles has its own aqueduct, and those make up our local supplies. Next. So what's happening with our supplies? We are significantly dependent in the world of water on hydrology and the weather. And this is one of the most recent drought monitor maps for the Western United States. The place where you can see a little bit of white on the map in the upper left-hand corner in Washington State, that's the only place that we're not experiencing drought. And the more significant and the deeper the color is, the more severe the drought. So you can see that California is challenged, and also the watershed, the Colorado River watershed, where we get some of our supply. Next. To give you kind of a pictorial look at what's happening, the 3 main reservoirs, 2 on the Colorado River, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and Oroville Reservoir up in Northern California, are at very low conditions right now. In fact, Oroville looks more like a trickle of a stream instead of a reservoir. Next. These are all record low levels for us. And Lake Mead, which, and I'm sorry, it looks like the slide got slightly askew here, but Lake Mead is our Colorado River storage reservoir. And you can see that the lake levels have been declining significantly. And on the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see there's a few different colors identified and tiers of water which identify shortage conditions. Which it is a situation that we're dealing with now. Next. In fact, on August the 15th of this year, August the 16th, the first ever shortage was declared on the Colorado River. And this is because we are not experiencing just a drought this year, but we've had years of drought. We're in our 18th year of drought now on the Colorado River. And the trend is not turning around like it has at times in the past. And so this is actually a historic moment for us and a big challenge for the region. Next. Because of that shortage declaration, Metropolitan took an action on the next day, on the 17th of August, to declare a water supply alert condition. And what that means is it's a notification to all of our member agencies for them to immediately look at their drought contingency plans and identify what is the appropriate response in their region. So they're on alert now. And that actually just got changed, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's not because of the Colorado River, it's because of our other main supply. Next. And that's in California. So many of you know that the governor declared emergency drought situation for much of the state over the past several months, starting in July. But up until yesterday, the Southern California region was not included in that drought declaration. Now it is a statewide emergency and a drought emergency in the sense that the governor has declared that it is of statewide interest that we address the water supply situation, and we will be responding accordingly. Next. So with this declaration, what will happen now is that all local water suppliers are going to be directed to implement shortage contingency plans and agricultural drought plans. And also our State Water Resources Control Board is going to be taking actions to try to preserve the supplies that we have in various reservoirs. Next. But is this just a drought? And this is a big question. Climate change has a number of impacts on our water supply, and I won't go into the detail on all of these pictures, but whether it is a shrinking snowpack, declining groundwater basins, water quality impacts from wildfires and other challenges that we're facing, including flooding at times, climate change is upon us and we're dealing with these issues. Next. Just as by way of an example, last year was the hottest year on record for both California and Arizona. Next. It was also the driest year on record in the Southwest. So we're dealing with not just dry situation, but hot temperatures as well. Next. And we're seeing declining snowpack in our Sierra Mountains. And what this image depicts is that if the trend continues, there's a potential that we could lose between 48 and 65% of our snowpack by the end of this century. Our snowpack is our largest water reservoir. It holds water from the winter through the spring and slowly melts for us to use as it moves into our streams and our river systems. Next. But something different has happened this year. These two graphs show our Northern Sierra supplies and our Colorado River Basin supplies. And there's a line across each one of them that shows what normal precipitation is, normal snowpack. And you can see that in most recent years, maybe it's difficult to see the numbers on the lower scale, but about halfway through is the year 2013. In the last 10 years, there's only been 2 years where the water supply has been above normal. And on the Colorado River Basin, which is actually a little bit misleading because it's regulated by the Lake Powell above Lake Mead, but we're still seeing the same challenges with our snowpack being below normal most of the time. But what's different this year is that while we had not the best year, but we had at least 72% of our snowfall in the Northern Sierras, unfortunately, it only resulted in 38% of water getting into our streams. What's worse, on the Colorado River Basin, we had 88% of snowpack, and yet we only saw 32% of that reach our rivers and streams. So something different is happening. There's more evaporation occurring, and we're not seeing the water supplies that we've been accustomed to in the past. Next. Thankfully, we've been working to develop our storage programs over the years. And then the last big rainy year, and we were able to move quite a bit of water in storage, and we've been holding it in storage. We are now starting to draw that down. You can see in the graph on the far right, we had a record level of storage of 3.2 million acre feet in our reservoirs. That's down now to about 2.6, and it is helping us get through, but it's going to be a challenge for us if we continue to have dry years. Next. We also have been able to build storage in Lake Mead. And this is a little bit trickier, and I won't get into the details of it, but the way we are able to store water in Lake Mead is because we've conserved water, and it allows us to hold water behind the dam, and that's water we can use at another time. Next. This was something that was arranged through a program on the Colorado River from the the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan. And in that plan, the original plan allowed for some storage, but this more recent plan is aimed at trying to determine how we're going to be able to deal with these shortage and this declining lake levels over the next several years. Next. We're seeing similar challenges in California. And in fact, what the state is signaling to us is that they anticipate, unlike the whopping 5% allocation we got from our water supply this year, we may only get a 0% allocation, meaning no water in the beginning of the water year on December 1st. Our hope would be that that water supply would increase with winter rains and snow, but we don't know that yet. And so we are moving to try to plan to ensure that we conserve as much water in storage as we can for the future, that we address some of the water quality needs that we have in the Delta, and that we provide for minimum health and safety needs. But it's likely that some mandatory water use restrictions are coming. Next. Metropolitan has a large area, and we're able to move water through most of it from one end to the other to satisfy the needs of our member agencies. However, up in the northern western portion of our service area, these agencies depend almost 100% on the State Water Project. And this is a challenge with a 0 allocation. Next. So as we respond to the state and identify what is a minimum needs for health and safety, we are going to be trying to protect this region and ensure that there's adequate supplies for their drinking water and sanitation, to ensure there's water for fire protection and some commercial industrial. But there will likely be a challenge to have any kind of outdoor irrigation in coming months if we do not see more rainfall. Again, this is for this specific part of our service area. Next. So given this, this challenge for the water resources in our region and the most recent declaration by the governor, the Metropolitan Board in November is going to be calling on its member agencies to consider implementing their drought contingency plans. These are local plans that are required by the state of California. And the good news about that is that they're locally developed and locally implemented. So it allows for each region to identify its own challenges and the best way to respond to those challenges. Again, water supplies are not uniform, and each region has its own resources. We'll also be looking at ways to augment our conservation programs and the rebates we offer the public, and trying to expedite some projects to help those parts of our service area that have less supplies. Next. So that's what we're doing for the drought right now. And then for the future, we're working on an integrated water resources plan to ensure that we have local resource supplies that we invest in with our member agencies, that we are building more innovative, modern technology inspired projects that can better provide for our region, that we are also funding conservation to try and ensure that we're doing the best with the water resources we have. Next. This is just showing a shift in our local supply target. And I'm going to move past this because this is a little bit technical. And the main point of it is just that we're moving away from 2 main imported supplies to develop an array of supplies. And we've been doing that. Next. Overall, what we're trying to do is maintain the imported supplies for the region, both from the Colorado River and from the State Water Project, and that we're trying to meet all of our future demands by expanding local supplies and conserving water. Next. The conservation story is a wonderful story for this region. It's true in San Diego County, and it's true in the rest of our service area. And that is our local use of water supply, the gallons per capita, as we call it, has been going down. In fact, about 40% since 1990. Next. So we're being more efficient with our water supply. And you can see that where we were once over, actually, you can't see because the whole graph isn't here, but over 200 gallons a day, we're now looking at 120 gallons per capita per day. Next. Overall, we've been working to invest in conservation and recycled water and in groundwater recovery for the region. And that has developed 7.2 million acre feet, almost 7.3 million acre feet of supplies. We use the term acre foot to measure water. It's about enough water for 3 families for a year. It's an acre, square acre, a foot deep, but that's the increment we use to describe water. And 7.2 or 7.3 million is quite a bit. Next. One new project that we're looking at right now is a new recycled water facility, and in fact, the largest in the nation. We are looking to partner with the LA County Sanitation Districts, which is also another large agency like Metropolitan, to reuse clean wastewater that is currently going out to the ocean. It's very similar to your Pure Water San Diego project. And it would be a supply that we would be able to both replenish groundwater basins and move throughout our entire system once drinking water regulations allow for that. Next. That project's about 150 million gallons per day, enough water for 500,000 homes. And as I said, one of the largest in the nation, if not the world. Next. So I want to focus and getting towards the end of my presentation on some of the conservation programs that we have available to the region. And you probably know these by SoCal Water Smart or San Diego Water Smart. We have a larger brand, if you will, Be Waterwise, and we try to connect all of our member agency and their communities with different resources for the region. But that is a way for consumers to access water saving equipment and rebates to replace turf in their yard and have California friendly, beautiful landscapes that are more appropriate for this region. Next. We also have commercial rebates for businesses. Go ahead. Businesses that are interested and willing to make their water use more efficient. And many of them find that it actually reduced their costs overall. So it's worth the investment, particularly if you can get the water agency to help you with it. And we've got resources to do that. Next. Okay. So imagine a day without water. And then if you would, join us and pledge to do your part to be good stewards of this precious resource. There's a lot being done in San Diego County, and I look forward to listening about it with Dana. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Dee. That was very informative. Our next speaker, actually, I'm going to introduce our next 2 speakers because they're going to be kind of going back and forth. Our next speaker, the first one of our next 2 is Ann Olmstead. She served on the San Diego County Water Authority Board and is on the League of Women Voters California Water Committee and is the recent president of League of Women Voters North County, San Diego. And then the next speaker after that is Dana Friehauf. She is a water resources manager and she's retired from the San Diego County Water Authority. And she currently serves on the Santa Fe Irrigation District Board and is also a League of Women Voters San Diego member. So first I'd like to welcome Ann. Is Ann there?
I cannot start my video, however. The host has stopped my video. Oh, well. Start my video. Got it.
Oh, good.
Thank you. And I want to thank Dee for that presentation. You know, we tend to think about ourselves as living in entities called counties. But the truth of the matter is that our entire region is connected. We have similar topography, we have similar layout, our water supply problems are similar, and it's good for us to have that regional perspective. You might ask yourself, why do we need to import water? And the answer is simple. Because we are living in a semi-arid Mediterranean climate with a topography which provides us with only 7 very short seasonal rivers that dry up every year, an erratic amount of rainfall during the winter, periods of drought that can extend for long periods of time, and our population has grown to over 3 million people and continues to grow. And the only potable water we have had access to comes to us from far away through a system of pipes and aqueducts. First slide, please. And this is simply a repeat of what Dee has already told you. Our water simply comes, the California aqueduct is over 200 miles long. It's over 600 miles to the Oroville Reservoir. We simply are not able to survive without imported water, or at least that has been true in the past. Thank you. So the original residents, the Indians, dammed small creeks to make pools of water. The Spanish missionaries built a low dam on the San Diego River. In the 1880s, the 5,000 Americans who had come to San Diego were relying on wells and their local seasonal waters to provide water. And as time went on and more people came, larger dams were built. But all of the water was local runoff from the erratic seasonal rains. By 1940, a population of 290,000 was just getting along barely with the local dams and a flume from the San Diego River, which came from the Cuyamaca Mountains. With the advent of World War II, the population doubled as San Diego became a primary Navy center for the war in the Pacific. The Navy ended up building a pipeline to connect San Diego with the Colorado River Aqueduct, which Metropolitan had built and started operating in 1941. San Diego even built a very large dam, San Vicente, to hold the water from the Colorado River when it came, and it finally came in 1947. By then, the population was over 400,000 people. And at that time, San Diego became dependent on imported water. Map number 2, please. This map shows the San Diego situation in 1946, and the dotted line is the one and only pipeline that was bringing Colorado River to San Diego. Since then, we've added 4 more pipelines. Thank you. The San Diego County Water Authority was formed with 9 member agencies in 1944 to administer waters received from the Colorado River. Since the first pipeline was built, more water agencies have been added over the years, and the 4 more pipelines were built. Map number 3, please. Today, there are 24 water districts, and they are all fulfilling their critical purpose of providing water to their respective areas of the county. You will notice that the water districts are all west of the mountains. This is where the population growth has occurred because this is the part of the county that had a reliable year-round supply of water. Now Dana is going to tell us about what has been achieved by the many water districts working together with the San Diego County Water Authority to not only bring water to San Diego, but to also make sure that the water supply is secure and reliable year-round as our population continues to grow. Thank you. Dana?
Great, thank you, Anne. Just real quick again, my name is Dana Friehauf, and I actually had a 30+ career in water, working at the San Diego County Water Authority in water resources and planning. I retired in 2019, and then I was fortunate to get elected in November of 2020 to the Santa Fe Irrigation District Board, and I am really enjoying that role. And I'm a proud member of the League of Women Voters. I have been for now 2 years or so, and I'm enjoying it immensely. And so I will get started. And Jeannie, can you pull up my slides for me, please? Great. Okay, part one, I am going to talk about the present. And if we could go to the first slide, please. Next slide. I think we've all talked about it. This is a theme for this evening, that water is essential to life, not only for, I mean, obviously for health and safety purposes, for water, for drinking and for showering, but also for the quality of life here we have in San Diego, for our parks, our playgrounds. I think this is actually a good use of lawn. It's active use, it's not ornamental, but again, important to our quality of life. We also have agriculture here in San Diego County that relies on water. And then also our local economy, our industries, commercial businesses. And as most of you probably know, San Diego is the craft beer capital of the nation, if not the world. And obviously without water, you would not have beer. And then in addition, if we go to the next slide, I want to follow up on what Ann mentioned regarding how closely linked our imported water supplies and infrastructure investments have linked to growth in San Diego County. You know, she mentioned that imported water was first delivered back in, started back in the late 1940s. And so you can see with that, and with the development of the distribution system to bring it into the region, we have been able to grow here in San Diego County. So without those imported water supplies, we would only be able to have, and we just relied on our local resources, we'd only have a population in San Diego County of about 500,000 people. So I would imagine that most of us on this Zoom call here would not be living in San Diego if it weren't for the investments that were made initially in those imported water supplies. And because our water, you know, is so valuable and so essential, I think it's really important for folks to understand, you know, how water is used here in San Diego, and what our sources are and where it comes from. And we've started talking about that, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. But first, I want to talk about how water is used here in San Diego County. If I could go to the next slide. You can see most of our water demand in San Diego is for residential uses. You'll see 66% is residential. We then have 16% is commercial and industrial. 10% is public and other. So that's like UCSD, San Diego State, for example. And then we have 8% that's agriculture. The one comment I want to make on our farmers here in San Diego County is they are very, very water efficient. And that is because the cost of water is so high. It's basically it's the bottom line for them in regards to, you know, their business. And so they do use water very wisely here in San Diego County. And then if we break it down, and as far as looking at that residential piece of the pie, if we go to the next slide, how is water used in our homes? And most of the water is used by residents in our outdoor landscape. As you can see from this chart here, over a little 50% is used on the landscape. And it's important to look at this graph when we're trying to look at water use efficiency and where we can save water. And while every drop counts, you know, however you can save water is important. You know, if you put in a low flow, we should all have low flow toilets by now. You know, as far as high efficiency, you know, clothes washers and faucets are all very important and all can save water. But really where we can see most of our savings is in the landscape. And that, again, as we've talked about, is removing those lawns, putting in low water use landscape, having efficient irrigation systems. So this really gives you an idea of how residents use water and how it can best be saved. And so with that, I'd like to now switch gears and talk about water and how, and our sources and how it's delivered to you, the customer. So if I could go to the next slide. You know, Ann showed the map of the water authorities service area here in our region, and those were the member agencies. And what I want to talk about is how the infrastructure we talk about the sources of water, but what about that infrastructure that actually delivers water to your meter and to your home? So the San Diego County Water Authority, we say Water Authority, has these large diameter pipelines that Ann talked about. There's 5 of them, and they are in, now you'll see, I don't have a pointer. And now you can see that they're those blue lines that go from north to south. Those are the right-of-ways that contain those 5, that contain those large diameter pipelines. And they range in size from 54 inches to 108 inches in diameter. And there's 310 miles of those large diameter pipelines. So then, the Water Authority brings the water into the region that we've purchased from Metropolitan or from our other sources. And then it's the retail agencies that deliver it to your home. And those 24 member agencies that Ann talked about. And so they have connections to those large diameter pipelines. Those blue lines you'll see, we could go back. They have connections to those pipelines, those large diameter pipelines to deliver water into the region. And if you add up all the retail agency pipelines, so these are the pipelines that are in the streets. If you add them all up, we have 10,000 miles of potable pipelines here in our region in San Diego County. And we've got approximately 240 pump stations and 340 potable water tanks, all that need to be maintained and operated by those local retail agencies. And then we also have 22 reservoirs and dams. So this is like Hodges Dam in North County, and in South County, we have like Sweetwater Reservoir or Lower Otay Reservoir to, again, store water. And so what's interesting is with a water system, unlike, let's say, roads, bridges, and other public works, it's kind of invisible to the people because it's mostly underground. And so people don't see that and realize that those pipelines need to be maintained. And a lot of them are aging now. Some of them are over 100 years old in the city of San Diego and other areas. And so investments are going to have to be made and to be proactive. We obviously want to repair those pipelines before they break. And so those are ongoing investments that water agencies need to make. And that's why we look real closely at the federal funding, the infrastructure package that is being talked about back in Washington. There's money there for infrastructure, and along at the state level. So those pots of money are very, very important. So I want to close out this my initial talk here about the present and talk about a little bit about those sources of water we have here in San Diego currently. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is from the San Diego County Water Authority's annual report, the fiscal year 2020 annual report. And this is the current supply kind of portfolio, the investments that have been made by the Water Authority and the retail water agencies. And actually, these investments have been made by you, the ratepayers, when you're purchasing, when you're using water, paying your water bills. This helps to go into this purchasing and investments of these more reliable supplies. So I'll just go through these bars real quick. The first one, the blue bar on the left, is the Imperial Irrigation District transfer. This was a transfer arrangement between the San Diego County Water Authority and the Imperial Irrigation District back in 2003, where the farmers, it's kind of a conservation project actually, the farmers in Imperial Valley conserve water, and then the conserved water is transferred to the San Diego County Water Authority. It's transferred through Metropolitan Water District Aqueduct and down into our system. It's a reliable supply of imported water because Imperial Irrigation District has higher water rights on the Colorado River than Metropolitan, so it's a little bit more reliable than Metropolitan's Colorado River supply. We also have the next bar then is the All-American and Coachella Canal Lining Project. And this is where the canals out in the Imperial Valley were earthen. So they were just earth, and water would percolate through and be lost. And so they were lined, and then the conserved water, it's kind of another conservation project. So then the conserved water, again, is being transferred to San Diego County. And the next is the Metropolitan Water District supplies. I think Dee had talked about those. And then we have our local surface water, These are primarily the dams that I mentioned, and they're owned by the retail water agencies. And this can vary based on how much rainfall we get, because that supply is definitely based on how much rainfall we get that flows into those reservoirs. And then we have, which is exciting, the seawater desalination project, which is up in Carlsbad. It is the largest seawater desalination project in the nation. And it came online back in 2015. And you can see it ranges from 8 to 10% of our supply. Then we have our groundwater. We have limited groundwater. I'll talk about this later on, but there is some groundwater that the retail agencies use. Recycled water, this is the non-potable recycled water is the next bar, the purple. And this is for non-potable uses on parks and golf courses. And then lastly, there's a small increment we call the San Luis Rey water transfer. And this is water that actually is from that canal lining project I talked about. And it was part of a settlement agreement between the federal government and the Indian tribes, some of the Indian tribes in North County. So some of the Indian tribes receive this transfer water through a federal settlement agreement. So these are our current sources of supply. And the one other thing I want to talk about is the region has also made investments in storage. We call it carryover storage. We raised the San Vicente Dam so we could capture more water and bring it down when it's available from our imported sources and store it, and then have it available during dry periods. And this is an excellent example of a climate change kind of adaptation measure where we can take water down, store it when it's available, because we have these extreme events, and be able to store it and then have it available during dry periods. And so I'll kind of wrap up this portion of the talk about the present, and that these supply, we believe that we are, with these supplies right now, have a reliable water supply. But with the current drought, there are so many uncertainties going forward, and that's why it is so important for people now to heed the governor's call for voluntary conservation, because the more water we can conserve now, the more we can keep in storage if this dry period continues for another few years. And so, yes, so water use efficiency is an important piece of this pie also. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to Anne.
Thank you very much, Dana. That was a very good explanation of where we are right now. But what we're now facing, of course, is the challenge of climate change. We're living right now through an extreme drought, as Dee pointed out to you. We don't know how long it will last. The bottom line is that because we can't know what's going to happen in the future, we have to do some planning. And I do want to say that thanks to the intense planning ahead and complicated strategic water supply arrangements made by the Water Authority over the years, the storage of Colorado water is helping us to shield our county from much of the current drought's effects. But of course, because we can't predict, that cannot be something that we can take lightly or irresponsibly. In recent months, we have also seen the effects of a drought impacting Northern California, which is also attributed in part to climate change impacts. And this has led to our other external water source, the State Water Project, as Dee explained, not able to ship very much water to the Central Valley and to Southern California this year, and the possibility of none next year is looming. The movie River's End showed some of the complexities of that particular system, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Dana, tell us what is being done in San Diego County to prepare for our uncertain future due to climate change.
Great, thanks, Anne. All right, it's me again. So now, Jeannie, you can go ahead and pull up the slides again. So now we're part two. and we're looking now towards the future. And, we've talked about some of the uncertainties associated with the Colorado River and the prolonged drought we have seen on the river, and uncertainties and the impacts due to climate change and what that means for the river. And as you saw in my last graph, we have quite a bit of reliance on the Colorado River. I think we've done a great job in reducing our reliance on the Delta, which is a good thing for those that watched that film. And I wish they would have highlighted that more in the film about the steps that we've taken in Southern California to reduce our reliance on the Delta. But again, we're now facing some uncertainties with the Colorado River. And so the water agencies in San Diego County are now looking at, well, okay, how do we secure reliable water into the future with these uncertainties? And so that's what I'm going to be talking about now. So if we could go to the next slide, Jeannie. And so when we're looking at investing in that next increment of supply, here are just some of the general factors that you would consider. First, you need to take into account your local conditions. What are our local assets here? What are our local resources? What do we have? For example, we have limited groundwater storage. And groundwater storage is, if you can imagine, like a large bathtub underneath the ground. It's like an aquifer, they often call it, where water can be stored. And unfortunately, we are groundwater challenged here in San Diego County. If you look at this map I have up on the screen, the blue signifies groundwater basins. And what you'll see in Los Angeles and Orange County, there's quite a bit of blue. That is like the San Fernando Valley, for example, in Los Angeles, and the Orange County groundwater basins. But if you look at San Diego, we don't have much groundwater. And so, for example, we have to take that into account when we look at the development of that. What is that going to be, that next increment of supply? We have, the other item is you have to manage for climate change impacts. This has to do with drought and these extreme weather conditions we're going to face. Minimize impact to the environment. That's obviously very important. It also needs to be sustainable, and the fact that we need to try to minimize those future uncertainties that we could face. And so perhaps having more local control over that water supply and not having factors that are so much out of our control. And then it has to be affordable, because the cost of water, while it's still a bargain compared to a lot of other of your cable, for example, or purchasing bottled water, it's a good deal. But you have to think about that as we move forward to make sure it remains affordable. And so when you're looking at that next increment of supply, you've got to look what's cost effective. What is the most cost effective option when I'm looking at developing that next increment of supply? And so the water agencies in San Diego have looked at, for example, what if we expand seawater desalination? What about stormwater capture? What about expanding recycled water? What about potable reuse? And so they've been, looking at these different options. And I think what they've narrowed it down to is looking at potable reuse. As Dee mentioned, there's this vast amount of resources as far as wastewater goes. It is now just being discharged out to the ocean, and a valuable resource that we could take and recycle and use. I do want to, before I talk about potable reuse, I do want to talk about stormwater capture though for a minute, because I know that is something that often comes up as a question. When it does rain, why don't we capture that stormwater? And actually we are in those local reservoirs that I talked about that we have that are more in the backcountry. And so then we talk about, well, what about urban runoff? So this is the runoff that comes off your streets, for example, and goes in the storm drain. And while that for water quality purposes, it's very important that we try to, have projects that limit the runoff of that water into our bays and estuaries for water quality purposes. And I know the County of San Diego, along with the municipalities, are very involved in the permitting of that to make sure to try to preclude those discharges. But when we look at it from a water supply perspective here in San Diego County, it becomes difficult. We're a bit challenged here. I think imagine in your mind, if you could, the San Diego River. And the San Diego River as it's flowing underneath I-5 and it heads out to the ocean. And it's like, at what point, how do we capture that water? we don't have groundwater. If you think about Orange County, if you're ever going up the 405, they have in their rivers, they have put in these, they're called settling basins, where they have the water flows down, and it's sort of, there's berms that are put up, the water's stopped, it's put in these settling kind of basins, and it perks down into the groundwater, and they store it in that sense. So they are able to store their urban water or urban runoff for stormwater capture. And so here in San Diego County, because we don't have that storage, it's very difficult. Where would we store it? How do we treat it? And how do we distribute it back in? It would just be, it's actually one of the more costly alternatives in a large scale. Now, as homeowners though, if in regards to rainwater capture, there's rain barrels that can be purchased, and there's rebates often for those. So that's something you can do yourself. But as far as a large scale stormwater capture, it's just really difficult here in San Diego County because we have nowhere to really store it besides the reservoirs we currently have. So now I want to talk about potable reuse. And so Jeannie, if you could go to the next slide. I just want to take a little bit more time. Dee showed this schematic, similar schematic earlier, but this talks about recycled water in the water purification process. So if you look at, there's your home, you flush your toilet, you wash your dishes, water goes down the sink, it goes to your wastewater treatment plant. And then a lot of times that water then is treated to a tertiary level and used for recycled water. So this is the purple pipe, it's non-potable, separate distribution system. It goes to agriculture, landscape, and industry. But what we're finding is that it's getting more and more expensive to develop that separate distribution system to go further and further out to find those non-potable customers. So what's becoming more cost effective is what we call potable reuse. And that is where you have an advanced purification facility, and the water is purified at the facility. And then it is either put in what we call environmental barrier. It's either put in a groundwater basin or a surface water reservoir and blended with those supplies and with an adequate contact time. Then it's treated again at the water treatment plant, and then it goes to your home. So this is the basic process here. So let me now talk about some of the projects, the potable reuse projects that we have in San Diego County that are being either under construction or in the planning or design phase or just conceptual. So we go to the next slide. So as the next increment of local supply, I'm sure you all heard of the Pure Water San Diego. That's the City of San Diego's project. And that they've got a phase one. This would be a project that would put the water in a local reservoir. And phase one is expected to come online in 2025. And the phase one is going to be about 33,000 acre feet. And this information is all from the San Diego County Water Authority's Urban Water Management Plan, or you can go to a lot of these, the agencies have information on their websites. And then they have phase two, which is going to come online in 2035, which is going to increase that amount to 93,000 acre feet, which is going to be quite a bit. It's going to make up quite a bit of their supply portfolio. Then the next project is one out in the East County, this East County Advanced Water Purification Project. This lead agency is Padre Dam Municipal Water District. They're out in Santee, and they're estimated to come online in 2025. Here, the water would also be put into a local reservoir, Lake Jennings, before again treated again and put in the distribution system. And also, they're also partnering with the Helix Water District. I believe we have a Helix Water District board member that is here in attendance. So they are involved in that project. Also, they own and operate Lake Jennings, to give them a plug. And then also we have, I think the County of San Diego is involved along with the City of El Cajon. And then the third project is up in Oceanside. They're Pure Water Oceanside. This is City of Oceanside. And actually this project is the one furthest along, expected to come online later this year, early next year. And this project though, instead of a local reservoir, they're using their groundwater basin, the Mission Basin there in that area in Oceanside, where they'll treat the water and it will then go into the groundwater basin to be pulled up and treated later. And then there's a number of agencies that are considering, these are all conceptual programs or projects. City of Escondido is considering a project. The Leavenhain Municipal Water District up in North County has also got a project they're looking at. This would be with the San Diego River Basin, and again, a more groundwater recharge type project. And then there's a large project being considered up in North County. We call it North County One Water Project. And there we've got 6 local agencies, 4 water agencies, 2 wastewater agencies, Encina wastewater treatment facility along with San Alejo are looking at also the notion of potable reuse. Because I think we realize that this makes most sense. And when you look at all those factors as far as minimizing environmental impact, making it sustainable, as far as dealing with climate change impacts and drought, that I think potable reuse is really going to be the future of water supply here in San Diego County. So now I'd like to close out, and I know Dee closed out also on this, and if you go to the next slide, Jeannie, is water use efficiency. Oops, she went a little too far. There we go, is water use efficiency. And again, I encourage you to first of all, figure out who your local water agency is if you haven't already, and then see what programs they have available for you to use to help save water and use water efficiency. There's classes, rebates, watersmartsd.org is our local website that's run by the San Diego County Water Authority. And you can go there actually and find your district if you don't know, and go to their websites. And then as Dee mentioned, there's bewaterwise.com where you can look at getting those rebates. And with that, I'm gonna wrap up my part of the presentation. And I think we're turning it back to Carol.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dana and Ann. That was really great. And we're gonna, I'm gonna give each speaker a minute or two to talk about any concluding statements that they'd like to make, maybe something that regarding some of the other presentations we had. And then I'd also like to ask everyone, if you have any questions, to submit them in the Q&A button. And then we hopefully we'll have about a half an hour to go over questions. So, Dee, would you like a minute or two to talk about any concluding statement?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. I think this presentation is really important. There's a lot happening with our water resources, and it's really valuable to have our communities connect with our water supply. We're doing a lot to plan for the future, and people probably noticed that we haven't been struggling like some of the rest of the state because of a lot of the investments that have been made so far. But it's going to take ongoing work to ensure that we're prepared for the future. And so I guess I'd just like to end again on asking everybody to take that pledge today, since it's Imagine a Day Without Water, and think about what you can do right now to contribute, whether it's for the short term to get through the water year, or for the long term to ensure that we have water resources for the region. And thank you.
Thank you. Ann, would you like to a minute or so to give any statement?
Certainly. What I would like to say is that I look at it from a historical perspective, and it is so clear that if our society was not technologically strong and deeply involved in science, there is no way that the number of people who live here in our county could live here. I think it's a miracle. We're fortunate, and I'm just grateful to be here. I'm born and raised here, and I still like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana?
Yeah, thank you. I just really appreciate the league providing this forum and an opportunity for us to educate the folks on, where your water comes from and kind of some of the issues. So I really appreciate having this forum, because I think education is so key. And hopefully, I know I've realized that over my course of the career that water is so complex here in California, and that it's really a balancing act of so many factors. But I think most importantly, it's a balancing act between using water wisely and having those reliable water supplies. Because I think as water agencies, we realize that we need to do our part and try to secure those reliable water supplies at the same time that we're asking folks to use water wisely. So again, I just appreciate the forum, and I look forward to any questions.
Well, thank you. Now I'd like to have Jane Andrews join me, and we're going to start with the Q&A session. And so I have a question, and it's actually what I hear a lot from everyone that I talked to about this webinar. And I think this goes to Dana and maybe Dee. Are they considering more desalination plants in Southern California or in San Diego proper, or San Diego area? Dana would like to start. Go ahead.
Right. Yes. I know when I was working at the Water Authority, we were looking at a potential project, a seawater desalination project, and coordinated with Camp Pendleton up in North County. But I think what was decided amongst the agencies, you know, in discussions with the retail agencies, is that potable reuse at this point made more sense for the future in regards to a lot of those factors I talked about, as far as impact to the environment, affordability, sustainability, that type of thing. So I think right now, where the agencies are looking towards potable reuse, and instead of seawater desalination here in San Diego County, and then perhaps Dee could address other areas of Southern California.
Yeah, sure. I'll just offer that there is a project. There's a couple of projects in north of San Diego County, one off Dana Point that is being pursued right now, and another one in the Huntington Beach area. Different varying sizes and specifics about how they're going to operate the facilities. But those are underway in terms of planning right now, trying to work through the environmental review process. There's also discussion up in Ventura County about potentially adding desal in that area, and Santa Barbara. So I don't know how far north you go with that, but this is ocean desal continues to be one of the tools in the toolbox, and it's one of the issues that's very site specific and resource specific. So it's definitely an option that's out there for some communities.
Thank you. Jane, do you have a question?
Okay, yeah, Carol and I are going to tag team on questions. And there was a question in the chat about watching the film, and I have put in the chat the link to the film. It will be available through this Sunday, October 24th. So one question that I have, having watched the film River's End, which emphasized that 80% of water use in California is agriculture, is, you know, given the economic power of large agricultural companies in California, what do you think should be the approach of the state to reducing the consumption of water in agriculture? I'm looking a little bit to Dee on this one, but there was an editorial in Sunday's LA Times on this subject that, you know, reducing household water consumption is only a fraction of water use. Dee, are you still with us? Yeah.
I'm happy to take a stab at that. So the overall water use in the state, about 50% of the water remains in the environment. Out of the remaining 50% that's there, 40% of it is ag, and the 20%, 10% is urban of the whole pie. So if you're looking at just the developed water, then that's where you get your 80% and 20% split. Mm. There is quite a bit happening within the agricultural industry on water use right now, and it's not specifically related to whether or not ag should use water for the sake of their production or their crops. It has more to do with what's happening with our groundwater basins in the state. And there was a law passed a couple years ago that relates to our groundwater management that is requiring all groundwater basins, which a lot of agriculture relies on groundwater. And unfortunately, a lot of agriculture and some communities have overdrafted groundwater basins. And so this law is designed to require all these communities to develop plans to stop pumping, overdrafting these groundwater basins. The dependence of agriculture on groundwater makes it such that some ongoing production is going to have to be curtailed. And they're talking about retiring land, agricultural land, in order to come into compliance with these new state requirements. And that's a significant issue in the Central Valley part of our state. But Metropolitan and also the County Water Authority, we've worked with a lot of agricultural entities on efficiency over the years. We have programs to try to both invest in agricultural efficiencies for on-farms so that they are using drip irrigation and other practices that help ensure that they're doing the best with the water supply that they have. And in turn, we've benefited from that water supply. We've also worked with agricultural districts to fallow land and rotate that fallowing so that it's not impacting the communities, but we have the benefit of that water supply. And more recently, Metropolitan has entered into some agreements with some of the smaller ag districts like the Bard Irrigation District, which grows really high water use crops in the summer when it's hot, alfalfa, things like that. And more valuable, lower water use crops in the winter, vegetable crops, things like that. And so we've developed a seasonal fallowing program, which we will pay them not to farm in the summer when we need that water during the hot, dry months. And they grow crops in the winter, which are higher value crops. And it's worked out as a very good opportunity for us to support each other, to allow for that agriculture to continue, but also do it in a more efficient manner that allows for the resource to be utilized and shared.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. So I have another question then. I'm not sure who this would go best to, either, well, Dana or Ann or Dee. Does it make sense to continue to build more housing for more people to come here when we are in a persistent drought? And how can our water supply be connected with our building policies? So who would like to take that one? Is Dana or Dee's gonna?
I was gonna let Dana jump in there just because I just answered the last question, but I'll start by saying there is statewide policy that requires that you prove that you have an adequate supply of water for housing developments of a certain size. So there is a connection between state water development, water use, and housing development. One of the challenges in the state right now is that we are housing short. So there's a shortage of housing in most communities across the state. So this is a challenge for us societally, and how we develop that housing in the most efficient way possible so that it is not impacting water to the extent that it might have in the past is going to be part of that solution. But I think that there's definitely more scrutiny on projects right now. We're just going to have to make sure that if anything new is developed, that it's the most efficient as it could be. But frankly, new development is actually pretty efficient. It's our older communities that tend to have more high water use, less fixtures that are low flow fixtures, things like that. And so what we're trying to do is incentivize that older housing stock to update their practices to be a little bit more efficient. But Dana, you might have a better response that's more locally driven.
No, Dee, I thought you did a great job in highlighting the laws that require you to do a verification and an assessment on. It's through the CEQA process and through the tentative map, final map stage, that for large developments you have to show you have proof of water. And also you're correct that the housing that's being constructed now is so much more efficient. And the other thing to take into account is that the more multifamily housing that is built is also going to be using less water. Because again, as I showed you in that one graph, a lot of water use is on the landscape. When you have multifamily, obviously you have limited landscape. And so that can use less water than if you had, the homes with large lots. So yeah.
Thank you. That's very informative. Jane?
Okay, I have another question. Given the concerns about the Colorado River water levels, does it make sense for the San Diego County Water Authority to consider building a second tunnel to the Colorado? I'm interested in Dee's opinion, but others may have a comment.
Anne and Dana, Anne particularly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I would love to talk about that. The very interesting question of whether we should spend $5 billion to build a tunnel from the Imperial Irrigation District to San Diego in order to bring the water from the Colorado River that we are now getting through the Metropolitan Water District is one that has been proposed. I think that we are going to be watching this very carefully in the league because the financial information is speculative at this point. There is no certainty that, as we all know, with any large public works project, the projection in the beginning is always lower than what the ultimate cost ends up being. So yeah, I think it's something that will be examined very carefully by many, many people before it ever has a hope of going forward.
Okay, does anybody else want to take that on? Or I think that pretty much answered is what, as far as.
Let's move on, Carol, because we have a lot of questions.
Okay, so I have a question here. Is I'm often asked why we need 24 separate local water agencies and why they can't combine some of them. Can you explain that? Dana or Anne?
Anne, would you like me to take that one?
Oh, please.
Okay. I think, a couple things there. We're often asked that question. I think it's a good question. And, I think as Anne showed you, as far as water supply development in our region, there, how it came about is through formation of these local water districts or the cities. And so over the course of the years, based on the community and the uniqueness of the community, they formed these water districts over the years. Now, there have been some that have been combined over the years. And generally what you do is go through the San Diego LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, and they look at do these districts make sense? And so there have been some that have combined over the years, but I think for the most part, I think it's important for each of those communities to have their local representation. For example, Valley Center is very different. Their customers are very different. Their agriculture primarily is very different from what's in Sweetwater Authority, for example, a national city. And so it's good to have sort of your local governing board there that knows the community, rather than trying to combine them all into one. And so I think there's better representation on these issues. And so I don't see them at this point being combined into the future, in the future. And I think as a special district too, a special water district, like the one I sit on the board of, I think it's important because we can really focus on water and what's important in our community. I think at cities, they do a great job, but cities have to deal with a lot of other issues too. So I think special districts serve an important purpose in that sense.
Okay. There are so many good questions. I'm going to combine two that relate to water quality. One is, how safe is our water supply from biological terrorism? And the other is, with potable water, what about viruses and unknowns in the wastewater? How can treating them really get rid of everything that's transmissible? It's a big question.
Dana, how about if I take the first part and let you take the second one? So we have a very large infrastructure system. Our pipelines and aqueducts, you can drive trucks through them. This is large infrastructure that is either next to you or under your feet, and you may not realize it. That moves water around the region. That said, we have very tight controls, monitor all of our water supply. We take hundreds of thousands of tests of our water quality at our treatment facilities. We operate actually we operate 5 treatment plants. 4 of them are in the top 10 in the nation in terms of size. So we take water quality treatment very seriously. And once it's in the pipeline, we're still tracking it and making sure that we're delivering it safe at the other end. That includes alarm systems. It includes a lot of additional security. We fly all of our aqueducts and sample to ensure that we're watching for security with drones and regular planes with people. So there's quite a bit of safety and security measures built into our operations. But the main thing is that it would take quite a bit of a compound in the volume of water that we have that's exposed in order to have it be a threat to the public. And I think it's just not that obvious to the public that it's that significant. There isn't something that is causing us that kind of concern. What we are more concerned with is just the challenges with the water supplies in general with source water quality than we are with any kind of a terrorist threat.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and similar to what Dee mentioned, the water treatment facilities here, again, constant testing, for example, and not only the treatment plants, but in the distribution systems themselves. And so it's a 24/7 operation too. It's continuous. So that's important to remember too, that the retail agencies also have something, and similar with the water authority, and ensuring that the water is safe. And so I think the second question dealt with more like potable reuse and making sure that water is safe for the customers. And one thing you have to remember is that this water is highly regulated by the State Water Resources Control Board. And I apologize, drinking water, I'm missing the name, but it's under the State Water Resources Control Board. And so it again, they have regulations in place to ensure that the water is treated, again, once it's purified, put into that environmental barrier, a water treatment, water reservoir or groundwater, and then treat it again. And so again, tested, making sure it meets all drinking water standards before it's distributed, to the homes in that sense. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions here. You might have put it in the slides. I don't exactly remember. What percentage of San Diego's water is from the State Water Project? So Dee, do you know that one, or is it individual water districts get different amounts?
Right.
11%.
Well, that 11%, well, it's right now we have 18% from Metropolitan Water District. So Dee, I don't know what the breakdown is, but I know it's probably mostly Colorado River water right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it depends. This is a year where we're pushing Colorado River water all the way through our system as far as we can push it, because we do not have adequate State Water Project supplies. But we did build a system with very large tunnel capacity to be able to move State Water Project water when we get it. And we love it when we get it, because it actually provides a really valuable blend to our water supply from the Colorado River. So one of the values in having 2 different sources of water, we consider our State Water Project water sweet water, like your district. And we consider the Colorado River a little more saline. So by blending the 2, we think we have the optimal water supply. But in years like this, the benefit of having 2 different systems is that sometimes we're able to draw more on one than the other. And that's in fact what we're doing right now. If we get a 0% allocation from the State Water Project next year, we will still be delivering some State Water Project supply, like we're doing in certain parts of our service area, but it's what we've already stored. And we're going to be trying to be careful with those resources because, again, we have parts of our surface area that is really primarily the only supply that they can get, including the San Fernando Valley, which has beautiful groundwater basins, as Dana pointed out, but they're contaminated. They have some industrial contamination in that part of our service area. And so they're working to try to address those challenges. But in the interim, they're relying on this supply.
Thank you. And then another quick question is, where do you find the information about rebates for replacing grass with turf? Dana, can you answer that one for the local?
Right. Yeah, I think you could. I think the best place to go is, and maybe if someone could type it in the chat, is watersmartsd.org. So that's watersmartsd.org. So there, that gets you regionally here in San Diego County to see what's available. And then as Dee mentioned, there's bewaterwise.com is the other website. Bewaterwise.com are the two that you can take a look at. Dee, does that capture it?
Yeah, that's correct. I would just say, and that they're additive. If you get a rebate at the local level, you can match it with a rebate at the regional and the larger regional level. So, so yeah, and that's true for a lot of the different programs. If you've got a local agency that's doing it, then you can often double it.
That's really important for us. Thank you. Jane?
Okay, well, we're running out of time, unfortunately. So the Colorado River, there's a few questions about it. One is, who makes all the decisions about the Colorado? It's very much in the news with the pictures, and Arizona and Nevada are having to, they're not being allowed Colorado water. So there's who decides, and then what's the environmental issues with the Colorado about, no water getting down with all the limitations of water.
Dee?
So, and I apologize, I just got distracted as you were asking that question. So if I missed the mark a little bit, please correct me. So on the Colorado River, one of the challenges is that we have had sort of an over allocation of supply. With the division of the water was developed in a year. The division between the states of the water rights on the Colorado River was developed in a time period where there was more water supply than we're seeing right now. So while I said we were in an 18-year drought, the other thing that we're thinking is going on is that we actually may not have as much supply on the river in order to fulfill those water rights as originally anticipated when that compact was decided. So one of the things that we are all working on is how do we deal with less? And the way that we've been trying to manage the situation and actually doing pretty well, but not good enough, is to develop these conservation programs that keep water in Lake Mead. And through these conservation programs, we've actually been able to keep 1.2 million acre feet behind Mead over the last 10 years, which is there's about 50-foot increase. Actually, 1.2 is not alone. If you add all of the different programs that the states have contributed to, it's about 50 feet of elevation in Lake Mead that we would be further down had we not been doing those programs. But it does require that we look at the overall needs of the existing contractors. There's also tribes that are concerned and interested in the water supply. And the country of Mexico is entitled to water from the Colorado River. And one of the issues that you may have been touching on is the fact that the river no longer connects to the Sea of Cortez, where it historically had. And so it does in part because of the agreement we have with Mexico. It goes through a pipe system at the end instead of flowing naturally. But we do work with the environmental community. We have a multi-species habitat plan that actually meets and exceeds its benchmarks. It's ahead of its schedule in addressing some of the environmental needs in that region. And they have, we've done some interesting experiments with pulse flows where we've released water at times when it's been available to allow for some of the flora and the fauna to come back. And it's amazing how quickly it responds with a little bit of water in the region. So these are all considerations as we're looking at how we're going to be dividing the water resources on the river. And I should just say, I mentioned that we're operating under a drought contingency plan right now. That is going to sunset in 2026. We are now negotiating or starting the negotiations with the other states, the basin states, both the upper basin states and the lower basin states. We're primarily working with Colorado, with Arizona and Nevada. Colorado's in the upper basin, and trying to work on programs where we can reduce our take from the river, but still be sustainable for the populations that we serve.
And let me just add that the Colorado River is under the Bureau of Reclamation, the federal government, and the 7 states work together under the Bureau in order to make decisions related to what happens on the Colorado, along with the Indian tribes in Mexico and everybody else who's involved.
Great answer. Thank you.
Well, I think that that's about as many questions as we can answer tonight. Anne, would you like to give us a concluding statement?
Am I saying goodbye or am I doing a concluding statement?
Your conclusion and announcement and your announcement.
Okay, very good. Then many thanks to the leagues of both North San Diego County and San Diego for making this program possible. And special thanks go to Dee Zinke of Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and Dana Friehauf of the Santa Fe Irrigation District and a former employee of the San Diego County Water Authority and a league member. Their expertise has helped us to frame the situation of what is now happening in Southern California and in San Diego County and what is being planned for the future. And I also thank Carol Parker for her moderating and Jean Widener for running the Zoom platform and Jane Andrews for her skill in guiding the group that planned this event. It is our intention to ask the County Water Authority to come to a meeting in the future to tell us in more detail what they're doing now and what they're planning to do in the future as we face our somewhat grim predictions about what's going to happen. Both leagues are joining to form a San Diego County Water Interest Group to learn more about San Diego water. And league members are certainly invited to join. Your monthly voter newsletter will have an article about how to join in November. We can all be grateful that thanks to the vision, energy, and time of earlier and the current boards of all the water districts and the San Diego County Water Authority, we today do not have to imagine a day without water here, today, or anytime soon. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Well said. And please fill out the survey that's in the chat if you have time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all. This was a terrific program.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.